hope you like that picture there. It was actually the only one I could find. That's a terrible picture. But thanks for being here, Eric. And
pleasure.
I guess really I want to start off just getting to know a little bit more about yourself, how you ended up in sales, and what you're doing currently.
Sure. As was mentioned just previously, I was at Salesforce.com in the early days, from 2002 to 2006. And I'll share, because I have a lot of affinity for the bets folks from a recruiting standpoint, that and people ask me about that all the time. I was the first enterprise guy hired at Salesforce.com. I had Marc Benioff directly. That was the first employee worldwide, not in San Francisco. I was in Boston, Massachusetts, so literally 3,000 miles away from the nearest coworker. Enterprise practice had not started before my arrival. It was an SMB play, running at about $15 million in run rate. And I will state clearly that, because people ask me all the time, how did I get into Salesforce? And I recognized when I was flying out to meet Marc Benioff that this was a really special opportunity. And I didn't know it at the time. I certainly know it now. So maybe the first thing I'd love to share for folks that are maybe 32 and younger, and really trying to figure out their trajectory of their careers. I lucked into it, but I certainly have pattern match subsequent to that from a hiring model standpoint, and it was, I call it the hang-around factor. I had a really, I had a privilege to run at a previous company, that allowed me to build some reciprocity, trust and respect with the VP of Business Development at that firm, Kristen Brown. And as an individual rep, I closed this deal with Cisco that helped her get her business development deal with Accenture. And fast forward a few months, she's out to dinner with Marc Benioff. She worked with Marc at Oracle. Marc said, God, I think this Salesforce.com thing may work for big enterprises, which I know seems silly sitting here in 2015 to say that. And Kristen very graciously said, hey, you should talk to this guy, Eric, in Grove Street. So if you give me 4 scotches, I'll tell you I was the most qualified person in the United States for that job. Right? In my sober moments, I recognize that there's a lot of folks that could have executed successfully. I had the benefit of what I call the hang-around factor in. So I'll give you one punchline, and I'd like to remember this. When I walked in to meet Marc for the first time ever in my life, a little bit nervous, walking to his office, he's a big hulking guy, for those of you who haven't met him. And his first words to me were, Eric Poley, Kristen Brown tells me you walk on water. Why shouldn't I hire you? Of course, I don't deserve that compliment, as my ex-wife will certainly attest to you. But it was a good first moment. I knew at that point in time the rest of the interview was going to go fine, and that's what got me to Salesforce. And I'd say the punchline to that is I've been doing SaaS, and it's been through all the different monikers. I'm sure that I've forgotten a few. It was software as a service, cloud hosting on demand, Web 2.0. There's been a lot of monikers for this thing, but I've been doing SaaS a long time. So I think one of the things that I hope I can bring to the table for my own team and for those that care about my opinion is I certainly, I think scar tissue is a good substitute for intellect sometimes. And I have plenty of scar tissue the last 10 years, actually more like 15 years now, going back to the early days of B2B SaaS. So hopefully some of that stuff may be of interest to you that's in the audience here, and I'd love to learn from you folks as well. So I look forward to having a little fun tonight.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have some fun and share some of that scar tissue with our crew here. I want to share just a little bit of what you're doing right now. You've done the sales gig now at Salesforce, 2 other places, and JW Player is pretty new for you.
I've been with JW for a year, and I'll go back to the hang-around factor. So the president of JW Player was my boss at Salesforce.com. I have not worked with Chris. His name's Chris Ball. I haven't worked with him since 2006, but I called him last year for some advice. First thing to do when you're looking for a new gig is call the folks you trust and respect the most, ask them for their opinion. I was not calling about JW Player. Fast forward, 3 weeks later, I was in the game, so to speak. And what JW Player does, it's a really unique place. I've never been a part of any place like it, including Salesforce. We're the largest online video platform in the world. So as we sit here today, we have 2.5 million publishers in 193 countries that are streaming 18 billion streams a month to 1.2 billion unique people across the planet. So 1 out of every 7 people on the planet watches video every month using our technology. So if you are watching a documentary on PBS, if you watch a TED Talk on TED.com, or something about Kim Kardashian on Pop Sugar, that's all me and game player. But the last one got some head nods. The other two didn't.
Well, yeah, this is definitely a crowd that's in the Kim Kardashian. A lot of meetup stories about that. But yeah, going back to those days back in Salesforce, it must have been really daunting. I mean, you think about where Salesforce was in 2002, selling to SMBs, maybe 5-figure deals. So you had a pretty big mandate. So what did you do in those early stages to just get things going from an enterprise sales perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I recognize we have a relatively condensed period of time. I think there's two things I was hoping to impart tonight. First is I've had the experience of being the first enterprise salesperson hired by 3 companies in a row. 3 different markets, 3 different industries, technologies, but there's some commonalities there. And I'd say the first thing to do is very clearly make sure you know, absolutely know your unique differentiated value. Not just whether or not you can serve somebody successfully. And I hear this in interviews all the time. Tell me about your qualification process. You hear, oh, I want to align with their needs. If I say if we can figure out if I can help them, we can move forward. That's not enough. When in the early days you get the first guy in, you have precious little time on a daily basis. The number one thing is know where you play best and offer unique value, and then go and figure out what your ideal customer profile targets are. And there is multiple. I know it's counterintuitive, but my experience is there's more than one ideal customer profile. There's multiple ICPs. Go figure out what those are, target them with your unique value, and explore the possibilities. And I'd say, and I'm sure some people are going to shake their heads no on this, with a different opinion. My experience is when you're the first guy in starting the enterprise offense, don't worry, don't get caught up in all the metrics that we read every day, that you need to look at your CAC, you need to look at LTV, you need to look at churn. In the early days you don't. From 0 to 1 million, go get points on the board. Pattern match, use your network, your executive team's network, and it's okay to sell with the cult of personality. I've kind of met some tremendous people here over the past 45 minutes. I know there's enterprise reps here in this room that know they've won deals, not because of the power of their solution, but because of their professionalism, their presence. That's okay in the early days. You don't want that later on when you're trying to scale, because you can't scale the cult of personality. But in the early days, just get points on the board, pattern match, get feedback from a product standpoint about what is needed in the enterprise space, but play to your strengths and those unique use cases. But it doesn't need to be binary, folks. So I guess one punchline I'll offer is that our definition of an enterprise deal at Salesforce changed every quarter. My first quote-unquote enterprise deal was a 250-seat deal at Interisys Networks. That was the largest deal in company history by 2x. And the following quarter, I was able to get Analog on for 500 seats. The following quarter after that, I was able to get SunGuard on for 1,000 seats. So our definition of what a big deal looked like changed every single quarter. Some of it based upon our credibility we were building, much of it based upon the product feedback we were bringing to say, in order to go out and get that SunGuard deal, here are the things that we really need to have from a product standpoint that we're not quite there yet. Let's put that on a bit of a slower boat and revisit it later.
A lot of really interesting points there to touch on. And obviously, the point of this meetup tonight is talking about scaling a sales process, right? It's interesting you note that a sales process is different when you're from 0 to 1 million versus maybe 1 million plus, maybe even like from 10 million on up. So maybe let's get back to maybe some definitions. I mean, what do you view as a sales process?
Sure. I think in very simple terms, a sales process is a common prism by which you are looking at the health of your deals and the health of the pipeline. When I say common language across the team that you're scaling. I'd say one of the things that has worked for me is lead by example. I liked being the first guy in those companies, and then getting through experience, actually going off and figuring out how to prospect, what messaging works, what templates work best, what the pricing strategies are, what the objections are, and how to handle those. Package those up, start building the first semblance of a playbook, and then when you start hiring people to scale, I think you bring a lot more credibility to the table saying, listen, I've just been living this for the last 6 months, a year. This is not academic. Let me share with you, go back to the scar tissue, here's what works, what doesn't. I'm trying to make sure you're getting off for a quick effect. And the sales process is a big part of it. One thing that I hear all the time is that sales processes need to be customized for each individual market, individual solution, et cetera. I disagree. And certainly I'll hear about that afterwards. We have a drink or two. But I really don't think that's the case. My experience has been in 5 high-tech startups as the first guy in and then the first executive from a VP standpoint in the last 3, is that I use the same sales process, folks, that I used at Salesforce.com. I used it at Barricode, which, if I believe Forbes, they just filed for their S1 to go public. They're up to 500 plus people. Objective Logistics, a Google-funded gig, and then JW Player. I'm using the exact same process with my team. Now, the definitions, for me, it's very simple. It's not to get too mathematical, but we have a qualified prospect formula. A qualified prospect means you have a differentiated vision match times power, times value, times plan. And so a differentiated vision match means we both agree, a prospect and us, that based upon the priorities that they have, the challenges that they're encountering to achieving those priorities, and the solutions we can bring to the table, uniquely help them be successful. Not just help them be successful, it can't be a checkbox. I want the deck stacked in my favor every single time. If I can't either elicit or drill in to the discovery to elicit some things where I can uniquely help them be successful, I need to qualify out immediately. I do not want to spend my precious resources, hours, sales team's time on deals where it's an even playing field.
Would you say that's really the most critical part of just generically speaking, the sales process, getting the qualification correct?
It really sets the tone for everything. I really do believe that after going back to the qualified prospect formula, the differential vision match is the anchor of everything. If you can get a good understanding of both, again, this can't be, we believe we're great and we're the perfect fit. We have to have articulation back to the client. It needs to be documented with an affirmation. I get it. If you guys can really do what you just articulated, I agree. This can uniquely help me be successful. If you get to that point, the rest flows somewhat organically. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be tightly managed, aligned with power. Are you defining what the value looks like? Right? And this is the toughest part in my experience of the sales process, which is how do you determine what the ROI impact is going to be in hard numbers, not soft, but hard numbers if they decide to go with your solution. So I try to ask on all of our deals, and I have some of my team here, I know they hear me like a broken record, is ask the question, do me a favor, not to be presumptuous, but when we fast forward 30 days after the deal, 60 days, 180 days, how are you going to judge the success of our initiative? Let's talk about success criteria.
So it's interesting you put the onus on the customer very early on to kind of help define what they see as success.
I do, and at the same time, we're also anchoring things because we know where we can play well normally, right? If you have some deals already won, you can suggest some things, say, here's what I'm hearing from other clients and how they're judging the success of our initiative. Does this resonate with you as well? So you can kind of game the system there, but not in a manipulative way, but help make sure that you're presenting success criteria that are manageable, objective, and things that you truly can achieve. And what my experience is, when you have those sort of conversations pre-sale, it builds an enormous amount of credibility with your client, your prospect. Say, oh wait a minute, he's already talking about making me successful and being on the hook for data that shows that I'm successful 6 months after they sign the deal. Not very many vendors, in my experience, have those sort of conversations on a pre-sale basis.
So, getting back to that 0 to $1 million phase for a second. Oftentimes, people will talk about their own personal sales process, because there really is no generic sales process put in place really early on. So what was that for you?
Yeah, so my sales process really has, going back to my comment that's been consistent, and my team knows this, that's here, is...
You don't have to raise your hand, by the way. It's okay.
And I won't test you. The net of it is, in simple terms, stage 1 for us is suspect. It means, hey, there's a little flirting going on. You said you want to talk to us, we kind of want to talk to you. There's been some communication, but we haven't gone through discovery. Stage 2 is discovery. And by the way, stage 2, importantly, is done just with the rep. No team, no executives. We don't need technical folks. We should train our salespeople enough that they can go off and tackle a discovery call on their own, which is stage 2. Here's where the magic happens. If after that discovery, we've identified that there's unique value that we can provide to this organization, and we have a philosophy, a sales process standpoint, that when we move to stage 3, which in our world is compete, we've decided to compete for this deal. And we have a team selling environment, which is one of my really I think one of the critical success factors to growing the enterprise offense is having a very collaborative team environment. This is basically a raise of the hand and say, as a professional salesperson, I believe we should invest the little resources we have to go out and compete for this deal. I want my executives involved, pre-sales tech, my product folks, oftentimes in the early days. This is a rally cry, and we all surround that deal and go after it, assuming the qualification is secure. So that's compete. The next stage is winning, and then the next stage is negotiation and close one. I try to keep it very simple. Now, obviously, there's a lot of detail within each one of those stages. What skills are needed for each stage to be successful and clear the hurdle? What tools are needed that you need to provide your sales team to be successful? So then it becomes a fun part of the process of honing the playbook and say, great, we have these milestones. Now we need to determine every day, how can we get increased sales velocity, increased win rates, increased average sales price, and then within each stage, we're just trying to accordion these things down on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis.
Get back to the interesting point about tools and skills, but thinking about that personal process, once you start to get a few people on the team, start to build a management structure, how do you transfer that kind of those personal experiences to other people?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm going to overuse, I know the most overused three-legged stool analogy, but I have one of my own.
We've got four here,
okay,
but we'll go with three.
You guys got a bonus. So I've been analyzing my own performance in this way I'm about to articulate for 14 years, and I still use it today. It's simple, but it's very effective. I think there's three things that I always look at to have transfer to your reps so you can scale. First is not a leading indicator of success, but a true indicator, right? Doing what we do for a living. Let's see how much we're actually selling. Are we achieving our goals? Are we achieving our quotas? Are we individual? At the executive level, am I hitting the goals that the firm has set out for me? So number one is just pure numbers. That's an easy one. The next two are the leading indicators of success. There's skills and knowledge that need to be acquired for people to be successful. And for the transference, and that's your question, we should have very clear definitions of excellence, of what defines excellence from a skill set standpoint, the knowledge that you need to be successful as a professional salesperson. And let's do certifications. I know that's going to get some groans from my team, right? Certifications on pitch deck, certifications on product knowledge. And again, my experience is it's best if you lead by example. For any of you that are first-time VPs, you're growing your team, be the best at all that stuff. We're trying to be. Lead by example. Be the first person to be certified. Be the best at the pitch. Be the best at negotiating. Be the best at discovery. In the early days, they go such a long way as you're getting ready to scale the team. Not only for your own information of how to impart the right things, but in terms of the team rallying behind you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really critical thing. I mean, I learned that early on when I was at Siebel. Like, everyone from the executives on down had to be certified on a corporate pitch and the demo. And they had to be able to give that at a drop of the hat. And you were graded, peer reviewed, and you were doing this in front of basically a crowd, not necessarily this big, but definitely in front of your peers, giving this presentation. I can't tell you how important it was to just reinforce what it is you're selling, the message, the value you're providing, getting a common language.
Absolutely. And it's stress-inducing, right? Let's face it, when you have to give a pitch in front of your own CEO or your own VP of sales. I remember at Salesforce, during our club trip, they decided to certify everybody who went on the club trip in Hawaii, and they just had the executives split up in different rooms. You didn't know who was going to be in there. There's people that walked into Marc Benioff saying, great, pitch me on my own product, right? A little stress-inducing. I didn't get that one, thank you.
You lucked out.
That's right, I lucked out. So I mentioned two legs of the stool. I'd be careless not to mention the third. So again, it's true numbers, skills and skills and knowledge, and the third is activities. Having great knowledge and skill without applying those to the right activities that are high leverage activities and things that when you put in one unit of effort, get you at least 3 or 4 units of production back. You don't look for the one-to-one. We look at the high leverage activities.
Can you maybe dig into that a little bit more? Like what do you mean by activity?
Yeah, sure. It's a big bucket. So I believe in terms of defining what excellence entails for a team, certainly we talk about certification, skills, and knowledge, but there also should be activities that are defined as excellent as well, that we know if we work our system, if we do this many presentations, if we have this much amount of pipeline that's being built on a weekly basis. There's a variety of things that go into leading indicators of success. That if we're doing these things on a daily basis and applying the right skills and knowledge, the scoreboard will take care of itself. It will happen. You got to trust in the system. And although I'm a Notre Dame guy, so I hate Alabama football, Nick Saban from Alabama had a really great quote about this exact thing. Like, why have you won so many national championships? He said, because we know what defines excellence every play, every moment, during the week, and then during the game. We don't watch the scoreboard. We know if we just perform excellently, things will happen. The scoreboard will take care of itself. And I like to think we have the same mantra.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any Alabama fans here in the audience, so I think you're okay.
I'm safe. I'm safe.
Yeah, sorry about that. So that's really interesting. Just think about those three things. So, at what point do you think we've done some early work? We've closed some decent-sized deals. We feel we have this proverbial product market fit. When do you, as a sales leader or as that first sales rep, when do you feel that it's clicked, where you have something which is potentially, to throw a word out there, repeatable?
Sure. I think you have some indicators from a metric standpoint. So in our business, and I want to keep moving the needle, but I always want to know, based on our goals, do we have at least 2.5x of raw pipeline? And I want at least 2x of weighted pipeline. So again, I look at metrics. Do I have enough things in the funnel to be successful? I look at win rates. I look at yield per rep. And I have some of my reps in the audience right now. I look at a quarterly yield per rep. I know what their quotas are. I know on average, what has happened on a month-to-month basis, every month for the last now 4 quarters I've been on board. Am I seeing that trend go up? So there's a whole host of these metrics, but there's some really clear indicators from and this is where I would urge us all to really treat this as I'm confident most of us do here in this room. We've been doing this for a while. This is a craft, right? In terms of getting people on board, it relates to kind of the hiring too. Having a metrics-driven sales process. After that first $1 million, again, the first $1 million, get points on the board. Don't worry about a repeatable process yet. When you have some wins, you understand why you've won, you're getting some feedback to product. From that 1 to 3, and certainly 3 to 10, now you're in scale mode. Now this is about creating a repeatable process, and that entails measuring what you're trying to accomplish at every stage to determine what you can tweak, tune, and hone for success. And that's going to be a daily endeavor. And every month we should be seeing improvements on those things.
So just out of, getting back to that question about tools, because obviously if you're a metrics-driven organization, you're capturing a lot of data points. What are the things that you've used to kind of help you get a better handle on some of those metrics?
So nobody will be surprised. Salesforce.com. Cool.
No, amazed. It's
awful. In addition to Salesforce, we have some pretty robust dashboards in Tableau. So Tableau's our BI tool, where I get a lot of the data that I just mentioned in terms of rep yield, win rates, pipeline versus goal, et cetera. All that stuff is automatically created at a touch of a button. I can see that on an as-needed basis. So those are the 2 anchors that we really have for the team.
And so, thinking about that post-million, starting to scale the organization, what really changes significantly for you? Thinking, one, from the manager point of view, as well from the rep point of view. Because obviously, that's a pretty large shift.
It is. So a couple of things change. Number one, from a management standpoint, you need to make sure that you're creating the process that is not relying on your personality. Right? So all this can take our egos out of it. If you've been doing something for 15, 20 years, you by definition should be better than the rep that you hired that's been doing these for 5 years, right? So you want to make sure as a leader that you're figuring out how to create a repeatable model from what you've accomplished from 0 to 1 million in a way that folks that don't have your experience or skill set can. And one of the things that, again, this may be controversial to some of the folks in the room, when I'm scaling my teams, it's truly a meritocracy. Right? The best deals go to the best athletes. Don't be so quick to go to geographies, vertical markets, assignments of zip codes, all that formal sort of focus of how you dissect your sales organization, get them to focus, that can come a little bit later.
It's a little controversial.
Yeah.
And people like their territories.
They do like their territories. And so I think a natural outgrowth is One of the things that I did when I arrived at JW, it was a bit of a Wild West. I had about a dozen reps or so on board, based here in New York, and I would have somebody that obviously had a very good skill set on a relative basis, closing a significant size deal, or the equivalent of a nice mid-market, upper mid-market deal, one moment, and then literally the next phone call with somebody that may have a $600 per year subscription. So it was such a hodgepodge, where the first thing I said is, number one, for the betterment of JW, best athletes, best deals. Let's hit this person who's proven themselves out at doing larger type deals. Let's get them focusing more on that, transactional stuff, to some of the other folks, and let's start creating a career path as well. So I think one of the things we all owe to our employees is the knowledge that I don't expect you to be in the same role 2 years from now than you are today. So not only is this a betterment to the company of assigning those right folks, but it gives a nice career path for folks as well from a comp plan, responsibility standpoint, getting some new chops to learn how to do some more complex deals. It all flows somewhat organically. And now, a year in, I have my VP of direct sales here with me, Rob Beasley, today. We are now finally saying, great, we now have some really great data points of wins against our key competitors, Brightcove and Uyala. So the first thing we're doing is now creating some, we have a couple of Brightcove killers on the team, or Uyala killers, where you have already built up a body of work, proven success of competing against these folks. Let's have you replicate that success, and you're going to be our specialist here. A lot of this stuff comes organically from the first wins, but I don't think you should force it too early.
Really good point. It reflects a lot of my own experience as well. Trying to develop reps who have real good expertise where they've done things from a competitive standpoint, they're interested, where they've gone in a particular industry focus, where they've gone really deep and had some success. Build upon that. Build upon that. Thinking about just the people you're bringing on your team. Because obviously, process, I mean, none of this really happens without process. If you don't have the people, no amount of process is going to actually matter. So, what are some of your thoughts around hiring?
Yeah, this is something that's front and center for me every single day. Besides closing deals with my team and making sure that we are having a fantastic 2015 production-wise, my number, I wouldn't even say two, my 1B priority is hiring. And our situation is that I'm not putting 40 people on my team this year. I'm going to be putting maybe another 10, maybe 15. If things keep proving out, maybe we'll be 20. But we're not going to put 40 or 50. So I need to choose really well. Right? So for me, hiring A players is absolutely paramount. And I know everybody says that, but it's all in the execution, the profile of who you're looking for. And certainly, if anybody wants to be stuck in a corner with me for an hour, I can talk about my hiring model, and I have some very strong thoughts. Hopefully some of them are true.
Yeah,
but I have some
we
strong
got
thoughts.
a little bit of that during lunch last time. But one of the points I think is interesting is that as you start to scale up your organization, you're going to have people that come from a lot of different backgrounds. Right? When we talk about enterprise sales, there's look at the audience here. We have people that are just starting. They really don't have much of a book of business or book of experience.
Sure.
Versus some people here who've been in the space for 30 odd years.
Yep.
And so how do you kind of reconcile that? Is the process key to that?
Yeah, great question. So again, my experience and the way I approach hiring at every company that I've been at in these early stages, we have the luxury. You don't have this when the company gets more mature. And again, a little bit counterculture, and I think the best folks have seen this with me as well, where I don't have a defined description that has, I need X amount of years, this is the comp levels. What I have is I have a very clear understanding of what I need to achieve for my entire firm over the course of 2015. I know what that quote is on my level. I know the budget dollars I have to spend to invest in people to bring them on board. I can now use those dollars any way I want. If I want to bring on 2 people at $70,000 salaries and OTEs of 140, I can do that. Or I could choose to say, I'm going to bring one guy in at 150,000, 140,000, and double their quota. That allows me to go after A players at all levels of that spectrum, Mark. So I can go after folks that are 2 or 3 years into their career that aren't going to be as hefty from a dollar standpoint, but I can see from my interview process and with my team that these are A players in the making. Other folks are going to have a little bit more body of work behind them. They'll demand more money, but there's more proven success. And I do have right now 2 very significant significantly successful enterprise guys on the team, one here in New York, the former director of strategic accounts at Yala, and a guy out in LA, that are on the far end of that spectrum. And I think it's one of the beauties of being in a relatively early stage commercial offense is that you can go off and find A players and plug them in the right fashion without trying to fit them into a box that's already been scoped, whether it be not only comp-wise, but very importantly, folks, it goes back to my comment of not putting boundaries there too early. Play to people's strengths. So right now, I still have the luxury of saying, oh, wait a minute. You have some experience in media, and your vertical has been, this is a real example, a guy that we just hired who's been in Florida. He has been doing video in the music industry for a long period of time. So I'm not going to artificially say, hey, you're from Florida, great, let's bring you on board and you have the Southeast. A lot of folks would normally do that. It's like, no, we're going to give you named accounts, we're going to give you the musical vertical, and from a career development standpoint, oh, you've never done international deals, would you like to? Part of my gig is to make sure you're expanding your horizons. Maybe we'll get you international stuff. We get the frame the role to match the A player, not the other way around. And my experience is in the early years, it's a much more successful and much better fashion to get A players on board.
And so, and obviously when you're dealing with A players, you're also dealing with A personalities, right? So getting them all on board to agree to your process, your language, what's that like?
Yeah, it's not as hard as you'd think. My experience is with the A players that I've had the privilege to work with, they want to be great. They like to have elevated definitions of excellence. One of the things I'm very confident, certain, my team will tell you that when I first arrived last year, I said, guys, we're going to win deals because of the world-class technology GW Player has. It's the best in the world. And if we're a B team, we're still going to have a great trajectory, we're going to sell a lot, we'll have a nice little exit, everybody make a couple of loans, we'll have a good time. Shame on us if that's the case. Let's take the mantra to say, we're going to take the responsibility to be truly world-class. We're going to be world-class from a professionalism standpoint, knowledge perspective, skills, so that when we go in and have a conversation with a prospect, they want to do business with us as professionals, independent of our technology. And we can marry both of those together, world-class technology and world-class people and professionalism. You burn the world up. You burn the world up. So my experience with that question with A players is they want that level of excellence. They want to know they're a part of something special, and we shouldn't settle on bringing things down to the least common denominator. Let's have high hopes, lofty expectations that are normally only exceeded by the A players who bring on board for themselves.
Good point. I want to kind of move on to really talking about some of that scar tissue we mentioned earlier. What were some of the things that you came across, some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
Yeah.
How did you overcome that?
Sure, so I'll tell you a story. So when I left Salesforce, 2006, had a good run, I was feeling good. My resume was out there for all the VCs, and I was fortunate to be brought on board to Veracode, employee 10, pre-beta, so as the VP of Sales. And already I was a little bit nervous. Here's a VP of Sales role for a firm that is pre-beta, but I expected the exec management team, knew they were brilliant. It was an application security space for those of you who don't know. And my scar tissue, and I urge you, anybody in this room who's thinking about doing this, don't do this. I was so, at that point in time, this is 2006, I was so focused on showing my firm what I can do from a sales standpoint. And I knew we were going to go off and sell to the biggest, baddest software firms in the world for application security. I said, great, let's talk about our top 10 targets. Oh, good, Adobe. I'm going to get Adobe to the table. We're going to go win Adobe in beta. So sure enough, I go off, I do my thing, I get all the top guys at Adobe in California to the table. It took me about 6 months for this particular sales cycle. A lot of investment. So I talk about high leverage activity and opportunity cost. Right? I had a lot riding on this. These were my trips, cost, etc. I get Adobe to the table, and they said, this is great. If you guys really can do this stuff, which is application security at the binary level, no source code required. And for those of you who are technically inclined, that sounds like magic.
No software, just like Salesforce.
Yeah, exactly,
I'm seeing a theme here.
So the punchline to this is Adobe said, great, if you guys can do this, we already pre-negotiated the deal. It's going to be $1 million a year, 3-year deal, fantastic. All we had to do is just get through the trial. One application, one trial, 24 hours. And we failed miserably. I mean, miserably. The debrief was one of the worst. Thank God I was on the phone. I would have cried in person. The debrief from the guy who I know he was rooting for us. He said, Eric, I just pulled an open source vulnerability tester for free off the internet and tested it against the same code that you guys tested that you're trying to charge me $1 million for. And we actually planted some vulnerabilities in the code to see if you would catch them. The free thing got more than you did. Oh no, so as you can imagine, really tough pill to swallow. Lesson learned there is don't go too big, too early. Like when you're kicking off your offense, know who your key targets are, but do not go for your biggest, baddest prospects before the product is ready for prime time, or at least near. You may get some folks that are early adopters who are willing to test a use case and give you feedback, as Adobe did. But it took me a year, and not quite a year and a half to get Adobe back to the table. Happy to report, they are a great client of Verico today. They believed in the vision, but that was a tough lesson for me to learn, because as you can imagine, that was a huge opportunity cost for me. I should have placed my bets better of organizations that weren't so high profile, frankly not as sophisticated. I'll share this, my experience is in the early days of kicking off your offense, it's really good to go off and focus on organizations where not only do you have great brand risk, but also where the level of sophistication and rigor that's going to be tackled from a due diligence standpoint isn't going to be totally world class. Adobe's folks, as smart as they come when it comes to software development, they put us through the technical rigor, unlike most firms. A mid-market ISV, they don't have the chops to do it. It's a quicker sales process, lower brand risk, easier time to value. It's a better place to start.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, very much like in Hatch, we had GE as a customer early on. That was a really huge success for us. That was one division. We started to go to the GE Capital Group, and it was a totally different ballgame. Huge users of Salesforce, big believers in it, have it top down. And the reality was that they had this really complicated security infrastructure that we just wanted to be able to address. And so knowing your targets definitely applies. That really wasn't a good target for us. Really financial services firms, downstream, yes.
Yep.
But right now, not really.
Those first targets are really important. One of the things that, I can go back to scar tissue, and I had this in Objective Logistics. There's been one software as a service company where I've had this sort of bad experience. I'll share it with you, because it should be either a gating factor for you creating your own offense, or if you're choosing a firm to join, is if you're offering a SaaS solution, you want to make sure that you can have number one, if you can be modular, great. Right? There's a lot of monolithic solutions out there that have to be binary. Either you take it all or you don't take any of it. So the first thing I'd suggest is if you have the luxury of doing so, go off and make sure that you have a modular sort of capability. So at JW Player, we can sell a player only, player plus ads technology, a full platform of hosting and streaming. I have multiple arrows in our quiver that we can play and shoot based upon how we can align best with that particular client. Importantly though, not beyond just being modular, is really focus on quick time to value. Quick time to value, as it will kill you if you don't have it. Objective Logistics, by all measures, Google Ventures funded, Atlas funded, I knew the investors there, I was there as the VP of Sales. Great vision. The time from trial to close, to prove the value, to show the metrics that we're actually affecting the success of our client organizations was 5 months. Way too long. When you sell a SaaS solution, you want someone to pull the lever to get a biscuit and say, great, you just added value to my world that I didn't have yesterday. The quicker you can make that, the better. If that's more than 30 days out, I would say, how do you try to bring that in? Can you be more modular? Can you find a different use case? Because for me, that was frankly the reason I left Objective Logistics. I'm happy to say they regrouped from a technology standpoint, but after 2.5 years, it was clear that I wasn't able to get a quicker time to value, and the offense just wasn't running correctly. So it's something I hope is not being encountered by anybody in this room, and I certainly hope it perhaps help make sure you focus on that if you're creating your own offense.
So I was going to ask to really kind of share maybe like 3 takeaways as maybe a VP of sales and as a rep, but also just want to open up to questions in the audience. If anyone has some thoughts, just they want to share some questions, please. We'll bring a mic over.
Hi. I just want to ask a question about, you talked about being able to choose between A players in the making that maybe have 2 to 3 years of experience versus an A player. I guess, how do you know an A player in the making? And then how do you know when it's the right time to get the actual A player?
Sure. Great question. So my experience is scenario-based interviews are the best way to see if somebody's got the same sort of philosophy and skills that you're looking for the role. Even folks who've been doing something for 2 to 3 years, if they're really good and natural A player, you'll see that manifest quickly. It can be something as simple as, hey, tell me about the last time you qualified out of a deal, why? Like, do people qualify out of deals? I had an interview today. It was fluff that question, right? How do you determine you have an appropriate pipeline? Oh, I want as much as I can get. Well, is that really true? You can spend 100% of the time building a pipeline, not closing any deals. That doesn't show that you have a rigor or discipline of how you approach your offense. And even folks who've been doing this for a few years, if they've had good training, and frankly, there's no points off for drafting after good training. So one of the things I like in terms of looking at A players in the making is when they came out of school, so I look where they went to school, oh, where did they go? Did they go to an A+ gig? It can be either big or small, I don't care, but I want to see that they went to an A+ gig in my world that has sold B2B SaaS. They've been a B2B SaaS salesperson for at least a couple of years. So I'll give you an example, ADP. Back in my Salesforce days, and I actually still look at it today, ADP, anybody here from ADP? Yeah. Hey, all right. So I know that ADP has great sales training, right? So as a hiring manager, if I see somebody come out of college and they've been at 3 years at ADP, my immediate light bulb goes up like, that person has been through the gauntlet, they have great sales training. If they may be open for a new role, let's go off and approach them. Why wouldn't I draft off of somebody else's investment in making them good over the first few years of their career? Does that make sense? Yeah. So I try to pattern match, and the best folks know this. I'm really keen to focus on folks that have been there 3 to 5 years. 4 years is kind of the magic number for me. My experience is A players in the making and A players generally will be open to a new gig about 4 years in. They may take a deep breath and keep going, so there's no points off there. But you don't want to contact A players one year in, 2 years in. They're building up their pipe, they're still building up their credibility, a little bit too early. That kind of 3 to 5 years is the magic in my experience. So that's for the younger folks. For the folks that are a little bit more established in their career, I look at the same thing but I extrapolate out. Like round numbers, I'll show openly. If somebody's around 30 years old, I want to see 2 gigs. Right? There's exceptions. I know the best folks are like, come on, there's exceptions. Of course, I know there's exceptions, but ideally, I want to see somebody with 2 gigs. I don't care if it's big or small, the first one, but I want to see at least one high, A gig that's a small startup where they've recognized, they've been through the dynamics of what it's like to be in a smaller firm. And if I can see both of those at the same time, that helps me at least as a first filter that this is something we should talk about.
Well, I'll pass that one first, then we'll get to you. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Peter Crosby. You mentioned that you're building international capacity. So how do you use those judgment skills for cross-cultural, cross-lingual, remote workers in order to build the same kind of ethic? Because it may not have the same kind of dynamics.
Sure, and good question. I'm not there yet with JW Player. So although we have clients in 193 countries, we're all based in the United States at this point in time. So this is not one I'm crossed over yet. My experience though is if you can find a leader that has experience in the market, especially when I mention A players in the making, I don't care frankly if they come from my industry. I mentioned the ADP example. I want to know they sell B2B SaaS, they have some great sort of foundational rigor, I can teach them the industry. When you're looking for international stuff, having somebody that has actually been in your space with domain expertise, proven success, that for me is really the first moniker. And frankly, as the higher you go up, I go back to my hang-around factor from when we started, as you're paying more for somebody, especially at the leadership level, you really want to make sure that you can either know them directly, or that's okay if you don't, but you should be able to have at least a one-level sanity check about whether or not that person is an A player. Somebody that you think is an A player says, I vouch for him, Mike is awesome, Julie's great, just like Kristen Brown graciously did for me with Marc Benioff. That is the safest bet in terms of hiring internationally from a leadership standpoint, and then let them run the offense.
Joel and Cammy.
Hey, Joel.
Okay. So I have a question. I'm not sure it applies to you because you work primarily. I guess you did SaaS. That's your world. But like my company is bringing a new technology. We're selling something new that's never been done before. So I'm building a sales team now, but I have no idea how to comp. Like they don't even know how to comp me yet because we don't have no idea what the revenue that's going to be generated out of this.
Yep.
How do you deal with something like that? I mean, you know, is it just by number of users? We have no idea what the ROI is going to be.
Sure.
So, you know, how do I deal with
Yeah,
that?
great question. I have a simple structure that I've used now from Salesforce, actually 4 companies in a row, and it's here now at JW Player to change subsequent to my arrival, as my team will attest. I'm going to go back to the B2B SaaS and we'll see if it's transferable. Anytime I've created a SaaS pricing structure, I've used 3 levers. And I tell this to the clients, we have a pricing model that's 3 levers, and you're in control of all 3. The first is the volume that you're putting onto the service. Now, Salesforce is the number of seats. At JW Player, it's the number of ads are being served. It's the amount of hosting and streaming in gigabytes. But it's still a volume consideration. 2 is length of term. And I'm very clear with my clients. I know a 24-month term is a more valuable contract than a 12-month term. And I'm happy to give added discounts in return for longer terms. So I give discounts on volume, discounts on term, and the third is cash provision. Many enterprises are willing to pay annually in advance. Great. As any self-respecting growing technology firm, I'd love to have that cash quicker. I'll give you some added discounts in return for the advanced payments. My experience is when you offer that up in a very conversational tone and truly let the customer know they are in control, say, you tell me what the volumes are, they're right, that are a conservative starting point. I try to anchor the conversations with normal terms of 24 months. I have some clients who want longer price predictability, 36 months or 48. I have others where it's a new initiative, they're only willing to sign up for 12 months. I'm cool with it all. You let me know what's best for you, recognizing that these accounts will be greater for the longer terms. And same thing for the cash. Monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual, it's all on the table. What I normally try to do is get it down to 2 options. And a client or a prospect will normally say, okay, you know what? I can do annually in advance. Give me the annual advance for these volumes for a 2-year deal versus a 3-year deal, and I'll make a decision. I like giving those sort of options to my clients. And from an overall volume pricing standpoint, obviously there has to be some benchmarking about like services in the market, where you sit from a value standpoint, what is familiar, and context is certainly key for the first of that lever. But it's been a successful path. 4 companies in a row, and Salesforce still uses that structure today. And it's a simple one, so it's not overly complex, and of course it reflects back to the comp model for salespeople, where, actually, if I may offer one suggestion, for those of you that are creating comp plans and pricing models, build a comp calculator for your sales team. Build it. Show them what commissions are going to make on the deals, because this allows them to be self-monitoring, where if they say that 2-year versus 3-year deal, annual payments, they don't need to ask their management, how much more can I discount for a 3rd-year deal? They're going to plug both in and see where their commissions are. The moment their commissions start going lower for the 3rd-year deal, they're not going to discount that far. They will self-monitor, and if your comp plan is built with the right sort of discipline, it should reflect what the company wants the sales reps to do, of course. So I found that the way to create very little friction about discounting policies within an organization, give people an understanding of what they're going to make on their own. Does that answer your question at all?
Again, it's the problem, it's the SaaS. We're not a SaaS, I'm a B2B2C. So I don't know, so the businesses that I talk to, they're not really the ones that are generating the money. It's their customers that are going to be generating the money, and there's revenue share between us.
Sounds like next week's talk.
I'll chat afterwards.
We'll take one last question. Joel.
Hey, Joel Rodriguez. My question is, what do you know when to scale a sales team? So, you're the first guy in, you're looking at your initial metrics, you're selling. Is there a particular heuristic you use? Do you look at LTV to CAC? and determine that there's a certain multiple there that is attractive. What is that multiple, or how do you think of when the right time is to scale?
Yeah, I think it's less to do with CAC or LTV, because from 0 to 1 million, as I mentioned, I don't think those are really the things that are important. I think, to answer your question specifically, my experience is once you get up to the $1 million mark, now that can be different depending on the average sales price of the deals. But let's use 12, even a dozen. When I get a dozen deals in play that have been sold, and my pricing strategy is working, my differentiated value is working, I can forecast accurately when those deals are going to come in based upon the moving parts of the deal, how long tech validation occurs, what happens during tech validation, is there a trial required, can we just do it with a demo? You're going to learn a lot in those first 12 deals, and that's when the first sort of draft of the playbook gets put together. So great, I got a dozen data points for customers that look like the folks that I should be going after. Our value props resonating. We have a couple of preliminary tools that we can use to help speed things along and shepherd it through the sales process. I kind of know what tech validation requires and what parts of my team need to help me with that. You can pattern match pretty good after about, in my experience, those first dozen deals, but it's less about the metrics at that point. It's great, I'm going to now put together a sales process, going back to what I said before. What does qualification look like? When you move to compete, how do you know you're winning, and certainly into negotiation? Each one of those stages should be really clearly articulated about what's included, who's involved, what accountability is there across the team. When I say team, truly team selling, salespeople, pre-sales engineers, product. That offense has a bit of a semblance, and it's going to be tuned and honed, but that's when you start, in my experience, scaling that thing up. And then the metrics become really important, right? So now, once you start, you should just recognize your messy metrics. Like, okay, our CAC is huge, our average sales cycle is 3 months longer than we want it to be, but at least now you have the working semblance of an offense. You maybe firing on 2 cylinders, not 12, then you start every quarter just moving that thing along and tightening it up.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, you're not really going to get great metrics if you don't really have any sort of process in place to begin with.
And again, I know a lot of us, let's talk about practicality, right? A lot of us are talking about funding rounds. My experience is when you're going from C to A, the metrics, although they start asking about them, they just want to see, are you guys trailing up from a new monthly recurring revenue? What's your NMR look like? What's your customer acquisition look like? How many customers have actually signed contracts? It's really the basics of, are you getting some traction in the market? How successful and efficient your offense is, it comes later.
I'm going to ask 2 last things. And you've been really gracious this evening. Really thanks for a lot of the great insight. I want to ask 3 takeaways for VPs of sales thinking about scaling the sales process.
Okay.
As well as 3 takeaways from a sales rep. And then I'm going to ask you one last thing.
Okay. I'll do the sales rep first, and I'm going to hear a groan from my group. I have this up on our board in our office. There's 3 things. 1, be at the point of sale. Sounds like a simple thing. Be at the point of sale. Make sure you're investing your time with folks who've got some juice. Somebody who can influence the decision, make the decision, owns the budget for the decision. So many times, we've all seen it, reps say, that was a fantastic call. I just spent an hour with this guy. He loves us. And he's 4 levels removed from the decision process of what's going on with that organization. So 1, be at the point of sale. 2 is be knowledgeable at the point of sale. And this goes back to the skills and skills and knowledge people are acquiring on their own. So the company owes a rep a lot of things. I owe my reps tools, efficiencies, ways to protect their precious time, make sure they're spending most of their time selling. But from a rep standpoint, you have a big burden. If you're an A player, you have a big burden on yourself to be intellectually curious and have great knowledge at the point of sale. Do I know everything about my product? Do I know how my product compares to not just generally the competition, but based upon who I'm competing against? I'm going to use these 3 bullet points from a value standpoint when I'm competing against X, and I'm only going to use 1 of those 3 and 2 new ones when I'm competing against Y. The sophistication of that offense is harder to execute, but much more effective when A players gravitate towards that. So that's number 2, be knowledgeable at the point of sale. And 3 is be sales strong. We should look at sales processes and craft, common language, and we should be looking every day of how we can hone our craft to become better and better and better at that. So we truly are operating a world-class manner. So that's my That's my rep suggestion. So we can do the in shorter form, the VP?
Yeah.
Were you getting pulled off the stage?
No. We may lose some tape there in 3 minutes. So.
I wish I knew I was going to impart something so wonderful that it would need to be taped. I would say from an executive standpoint, I would say certainly the team selling culture is really critical. And this is not just a moniker, hey, we're a team selling organization. When you're writing the playbook for a new offense, you truly need every facet of the organization included in that offense. From product to pre-sales, executive management alignment. So I'd say that if you have a team selling offense with milestones that give you really good clarity of the health of the deal. For example, one relevant but representative example, first week of every month, we have executive alignment with our top 20 deals. We are making phone calls to our top 20 deals to make sure the executive that we're not going to be single-threaded. That sort of team selling culture should be manifested throughout everything. So I think that's huge. We already talked about A players. That was definitely one. None of this offense counts if you don't have the folks coming on board to execute. And I would say, in clear terms, I don't look at it as my role to motivate people to be successful. If you hire A players, they are self-motivated all by themselves. We should give them paths of inspiration and where to focus that motivation, but it's not about motivating folks. Get the right folks on board and great things happen. So that's two. Okay, third, since we're talking about scale, I'm going to go back to the differentiated value and the qualifying ad. It is such a powerful thing, and we all say we do it, and I know in my experience, sometimes I'm pretty shoddy at it. You need to qualify stuff out quicker than normal, right? When you're starting to build the offense, you have to know when you play best and get out of the game completely if you know that it's just an even playing field. Most people say, oh, I think I can win this. You need to have certainty that you have a unique way to go off and get a path to success that nobody else can, and be really diligent.
It really comes down to time, and that's really the most precious resource as a rep and a manager.